The massive ships appeared at the edge of the solar system like dark clouds against the stars. Admiral stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the blue planet grow larger on the viewing screen. His tall, gray skin gleamed under the ship's lights. His 4 arms moved across the control panels with practiced ease. "Status report," he commanded in his deep voice. "All ships ready, Admiral," replied his second officer. "The fleet counts 2,000 vessels, weapons charged, shields active." Nodded, his black eyes stared at Earth with satisfaction. It had been 847 years since the Empire last visited this small world. Back then, it had been so easy to conquer. The humans were weak. They fought with simple weapons. Their technology was primitive. Their minds could not even speak to each other across space like proper beings. They had taken everything valuable from Earth. They forced the humans to dig deep into their planet. They made them pull out metals and crystals. They took their water and their clean air. When the planet became empty and useless, they simply left. Only a few thousand humans remained alive, scattered and broken. "Sir, should we begin landing procedures?" asked the communications officer. "Not yet," said. He pulled up the old files on his screen. Pictures of Earth from long ago filled the display. He saw images of burning cities and humans running in fear. He saw the great machines that had stripped the mountains bare. He remembered the final reports that declared the planet depleted and worthless. "The records show this world was abandoned," he told his officers. "The remaining humans were primitive survivors. They should have died out centuries ago, or at best, returned to living in caves." But something was wrong with what he saw now. His instruments showed energy readings that made no sense. There were structures in orbit around Earth that should not exist. The planet itself glowed with life signs that were far too strong for a dead world. "Run a deep scan," he ordered. The science officer worked quickly at her station. Her tentacles danced across the controls. "Admiral, I'm reading massive energy signatures across the planet's surface. There are cities, but they're unlike anything in our database." "Cities?" His voice carried surprise. "Show me." The main screen changed to show close-up images of Earth. What the Admiral saw made his breath catch in his throat. The planet below was green and blue and beautiful. Forests covered much of the land, but mixed in with the trees were buildings that seemed to grow from the Earth itself. Rivers of light flowed between settlements. The air was so clean it sparkled. "This cannot be correct," muttered. "Run the scan again." "Sir, the readings are accurate," the science officer replied. "I'm also detecting artificial structures in orbit. They appear to be alive somehow. They pulse with energy like living things." Moved closer to the screen. His 4 hands clenched into fists. "What kind of technology creates living buildings?" "Unknown, Admiral, but there's more. I'm reading transportation networks that appear to move without any visible power source. And the population. Sir, there are billions of life forms down there." "Billions?" His voice rose. "That's impossible. We left only thousands." His mind raced with possibilities. Perhaps another alien race had found Earth and colonized it. That would explain the strange technology. It would also mean competition for the planet's resources. The Empire needed those resources desperately. Their own worlds were running low on the minerals required to keep their vast civilization running. "Could these be human descendants?" asked the second officer. Laughed. It was a harsh sound that echoed through the bridge. "Humans. Those weak creatures could never build anything like this. They barely understood fire when we left them." But even as he spoke, doubt crept into his mind. The energy patterns were unlike any alien technology in the Empire's vast database. They seemed to work with natural forces rather than against them. Most alien races built machines that conquered nature. These readings suggested something that worked together with the planet itself. "Admiral, incoming transmission," the communications officer announced. "From where?" "The planet's surface, sir. It's in our language." Silence fell over the bridge. Every officer turned to stare at their admiral. How could anything on Earth speak? "Put it through," commanded. A voice filled the bridge. It was calm and gentle like wind through leaves. It spoke perfect with no accent. "Welcome back to Earth, Admiral of the Empire. We have been expecting you." The Admiral's 4 hands gripped the command rail so hard his knuckles turned white. "Who is this? Identify yourself." "I am Doctor speaking for the people of Earth. We know why you have returned. We understand your empire faces difficult times. Perhaps we should talk." "Talk?" His voice was filled with anger and confusion. "You will surrender immediately. This planet belongs to the Empire by right of conquest." "That was a very long time ago, Admiral. Many things have changed since then. Would you like to see?" Before anyone could respond, the main screen flickered. The view of space disappeared. Instead, they saw the inside of a room filled with warm light. An old human woman sat at a simple wooden table. She had gray hair and kind eyes. She looked directly at the camera as if she could see them. "How did you access our systems?" demanded. The woman smiled. "The same way I accessed your mind to learn your language, Admiral. The same way I know you have 2,000 ships and that you're afraid of what you're seeing." Every on the bridge felt a chill run through their bodies. Their instruments were heavily shielded. Their thoughts were supposed to be private. No known technology could break through their mental barriers. "That's impossible," the science officer whispered. "Many things that were once impossible have become simple," the woman said. "Admiral, you expected to find an empty world. Instead, you found something that frightens you. This is because humanity has grown during your absence. We have learned things that your empire never imagined." The image faded, leaving them staring at the stars once again. Stood frozen for a long moment. Then he turned to his officers. "Prepare for full planetary bombardment. Whatever these creatures are, we will destroy them before they become a threat." "Sir," the weapons officer said slowly, "our targeting systems are not responding." "What?" "I can't lock onto anything on the planet's surface. It's as if our weapons refuse to see any targets." Admiral stared at the beautiful blue world below. For the first time in his long military career, he felt something he had never experienced before: uncertainty. What had humanity become in their absence? And what were they going to do about it? Captain led his scouting team through the clouds toward Earth's surface. His small ship was equipped with the Empire's best stealth technology. No primitive species had ever detected them before. Behind him, 3 other scouts checked their equipment one final time. "Landing site selected," announced Pilot In. "The old records show this area was called North America. It was heavily mined during our occupation." Nodded and studied the data on his screen. According to the files, this region should be a wasteland of empty holes and poisoned ground. Instead, his instruments showed something impossible. The area teemed with life and energy. "Beginning descent," In said. "Stealth fields active." The ship dropped through thick white clouds. When they broke through into clear air, every on board froze in shock. Below them stretched a landscape that seemed to come from a dream. What had once been a mining zone was now covered in what looked like a living city. Buildings grew from the ground like enormous trees, their walls made of some material that shifted between metal and wood. Gardens covered every surface, with plants that glowed softly in the afternoon light. Rivers of pure blue water flowed in perfect spirals between the structures, but these weren't normal waterways. They carried light instead of just liquid, and small boats moved along them without any visible means of power. People walked on paths that seemed to float slightly above the ground. "By the void," whispered Scout X, "what kind of technology is this?" "Unknown," replied, but his voice was tight with worry. "Set us down in that forest clearing. We'll observe from there." The ship landed silently in a grove of trees that had silver bark and leaves that chimed like bells in the breeze. The scouts put on their camouflage suits and stepped outside. The air smelled clean and fresh, with no trace of the pollution that should have remained after centuries of mining. They moved carefully through the forest toward the edge of the living city. Their suits made them nearly invisible, bending light around their forms. It was technology that had never failed them before. As they reached the tree line, raised his hand for the team to stop. Through his scope, he watched the humans going about their daily lives. What he saw made his blood run cold. The humans looked the same as in the old records, but they moved differently. They walked with a grace and confidence that seemed unnatural. A group of children played in a nearby park, but their game involved floating rocks in the air and making them dance in complex patterns. The children laughed as they made the stones spin and weave around each other. "Are you recording this?" asked his team. "Yes, sir," replied the technology officer. "But the readings don't make sense. Those children are somehow controlling gravity without any visible devices." An adult human approached the playing children. She was a woman with dark hair who wore simple green clothes. She spoke to the children in a language the scouts' translators couldn't identify. Then she gestured toward a patch of bare ground. Plants began to grow from the earth, not slowly as plants should grow, but in fast motion. Flowers bloomed and trees stretched toward the sky. In moments, a small garden filled the empty space. "Impossible," breathed Scout. "No species can control plant growth like that." Was about to respond when something made him freeze. The woman with the dark hair had stopped what she was doing. She turned and looked directly at their hiding spot. Her eyes met his through the scope, and she smiled. She couldn't see them, their camouflage was perfect, but somehow she knew exactly where they were. The woman said something to the children. They stopped their game and also turned toward the hidden scouts. All of them were smiling, not with fear or aggression, but with the kind of warm welcome one gives to expected guests. "Sir," whispered the technology officer, "I think we should retreat." Before could respond, more humans appeared. They came walking out of the living buildings and floating down from the higher levels. Soon, dozens of people stood at the edge of the park, all looking toward the forest, all smiling. "They can see us," X said, his voice tight with panic. "How can they see us?" An elderly man stepped forward from the group. He had white hair and wore robes that seemed to be made of woven light. He raised his hand in a peaceful gesture and spoke. The scouts' translators immediately turned his words into, "Welcome to Earth, friends from the stars. We have been aware of your presence since you entered our solar system. There is no need for hiding or fear. Please come and talk with us." Felt sweat running down his back inside his suit. How does he speak our language? "Sir," the technology officer said urgently, "our ship systems are showing errors. Something is interfering with our equipment." Through his communicator heard In's voice from the ship. "Captain, we have a problem. The engines won't start. Some kind of field is preventing our departure." The elderly man spoke again. "Your ship is not damaged, Captain. We simply think it would be better if you stayed for a while. We have much to discuss." The fact that the human knew his name and rank sent ice through his veins. Their identities were supposed to be secure. Even if somehow the humans had detected their ship, there was no way they could know personal information about the crew. "Sir, what are your orders?" asked. Looked around at his team. They were the Empire's best scouts. They had explored hundreds of worlds and faced countless dangers, but none of them had ever encountered anything like this. These humans were displaying abilities that went far beyond any known technology. A young girl broke away from the group of humans and began walking toward the forest. She couldn't have been more than 12 years old, with bright red hair and freckles on her face. She walked directly toward their hiding spot as if following a clear path. When she reached the trees, she stopped just a few feet from where they crouched. She looked right at and spoke in perfect, My grandmother wants to invite you for tea. She says you've come a very long way and you must be tired and confused." The girl's voice was kind and gentle. She showed no fear of the armed alien soldiers hiding in the shadows. Instead, she seemed genuinely concerned for their. "She also says," the girl continued, "that you don't need to be afraid. We're not going to hurt you. We just want to help you understand what has happened here." Felt his hands shaking. In his 300 years of military service, he had never encountered anything that challenged his understanding of the universe like this. These humans were displaying powers that shouldn't exist. They knew things they couldn't possibly know, and they were treating the scouts not as enemies or threats, but as confused visitors who needed help. "Sir X whispered, 'What do we do?'" The girl tilted her head, listening to something the scouts couldn't hear. Then she nodded and spoke again. "Grandmother says to tell you that fighting won't work here anymore. The old ways of taking what you want through force stopped working on Earth a very long time ago. She says if you want to understand, you need to choose to learn." Made a decision that would have seemed impossible an hour ago. He reached up and deactivated his camouflage suit, becoming visible. His team gasped in shock, but after a moment they did the same. The little girl clapped her hands in delight. "Oh good, grandmother will be so pleased. She's been preparing tea for 4, just in case you decided to be brave." As they walked toward the group of humans, couldn't shake the feeling that everything he thought he knew about the universe was about to change forever. The tea room existed in a space that hurts mind to think about. The walls seemed to be made of solid starlight, and through them, he could see views of different places on Earth all at the same time. Sometimes he glimpsed other worlds entirely, with strange suns and unfamiliar constellations. Doctor sat across from the 4 scouts at a simple wooden table. She looked to be in her 70s, with silver hair and laugh lines around her eyes. But when she poured tea from a pot that steamed with rainbow colors, her movements had the grace of someone much younger. "Please drink," she said in perfect. "The tea will help your minds adjust to this place. It exists partially outside normal space and time. Your brains aren't used to processing that kind of reality." Picked up the delicate cup with trembling hands. The tea tasted like sunshine and spring rain. As soon as he drank it, the disorienting effects of the room began to fade. "How long have you been alive?" he asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. 847 years, replied calmly. "I was 23 when your people first arrived. I was one of the survivors when you left." The words hit like a physical blow. According to everything the Empire knew about humans, they lived less than a century. This woman should have been dead for 700 years. "That's impossible," Scout whispered. Smiled sadly. "Many things that were once impossible became necessary after your people left. We faced a choice, evolve or die. We chose to evolve." She gestured, and images appeared in the air above the table. The scouts saw Earth as it had been after the occupation. The planet was a broken, poisoned shell. The few thousand human survivors lived in caves and ruined buildings, struggling to find clean water and edible food. "We were so close to extinction," continued. "Our population had dropped below the point where a species can normally survive. Our planet was dying. We had no technology left, no resources, no hope." The images showed small groups of humans gathering together, sharing their meager supplies, caring for the sick and wounded. Despite their desperate situation, they weren't fighting each other. Instead, they were working together. "That's when it happened," said. "The trauma of near extinction triggered something that had been sleeping in human DNA for millions of years. We discovered that our minds were capable of far more than we had ever imagined." New images appeared. The scouts watched in amazement as humans began to develop strange abilities. Some could speak to animals and plants. Others could heal injuries with a touch. A few could move objects with their thoughts or see events happening far away. At first, we thought we were going crazy, laughed. Imagine being one of the last humans alive and suddenly hearing voices in your head. But the voices weren't madness. They were the thoughts of other humans, scattered across the planet. We were learning to connect with each other in ways we never knew were possible. X leaned forward. You developed telepathy. Much more than that, replied. We learned that consciousness isn't limited by the physical body. We could project our awareness across vast distances, even to other worlds. That's how we've been watching your empire for centuries. The room filled with images of worlds and fleets. The scouts recognized their home planets, their military bases, even the faces of their leaders. Every detail was perfect, as if someone had been standing right there recording everything. We know about your resource crisis, said gently. We know your empire is struggling to maintain itself. We know about the rebellion in the outer sectors and the failing harvests on your agricultural worlds. We've been watching, and we've been preparing. Preparing for what? Asked, though he feared the answer. To help, said simply. The scouts stared at her in confusion. Help? We enslaved your people. We destroyed your world. Why would you want to help us? His expression grew thoughtful. Because we learned something important during our evolution. Revenge only creates more pain. Destruction only leads to more destruction. If we wanted to build a better universe, we had to become better than those who had hurt us. She gestured again, and the images changed to show Earth's transformation. The scouts watched centuries pass in moments. They saw humans working together to heal their poisoned world. Plants and animals that should have been extinct began to return. The air and water became clean again. But it wasn't just environmental healing. The humans themselves were changing. They lived longer, grew wiser, developed abilities that seemed like magic. They learned to create matter from energy, to exist as pure consciousness when needed, to communicate with the planet itself. We became gardeners instead of conquerors, explained. We learned to work with natural forces instead of against them. Death became optional as we mastered the transfer of consciousness between bodies. Disease became manageable as we understood the connection between mind and body. But why show yourselves now? In asked. You could have remained hidden. We would never have known you still existed. His eyes grew sad. Because your empire is dying and in its death throes, it will destroy countless innocent worlds. You're not the only species facing resource shortages. Climate change, overpopulation, and technological disasters are spreading across the galaxy. Someone needs to intervene. Intervene how? By offering a different path, said. By showing that there's another way to live, another way to solve problems. Your people have incredible abilities, your biotechnology, your hive mind communication, your natural longevity. But you've used these gifts for conquest instead of creation. The images in the air changed to show possible futures. In some, the empire continued its path of destruction until the galaxy was empty and dead. In others, the empire worked with other species to heal damaged worlds and create abundance for all. We can teach you what we've learned, said, not through force but through choice. Every species has the potential to evolve beyond their current limitations, but they have to want to change. Felt overwhelmed by what he was seeing and hearing. And if we refuse, if the empire chooses to continue as it always has? Smile faded. Then you'll discover that the universe has ways of teaching painful lessons to those who refuse to learn gentle ones. The choice is yours, Captain, but the time for choosing is now. She waved her hand, and suddenly could see his ship through the strange walls of the tea room. Admiral was on the communicator, his 4 arms waving frantically as he tried to contact the scouting team. Your admiral is preparing for war, observed. He thinks force will solve this problem, just as it has solved so many others. He doesn't understand that humanity no longer responds to force the way we once did. What will you do if he attacks? Asked quietly. His eyes filled with ancient sadness. We will do what we must to protect not only ourselves, but all the innocent species your empire might hurt in the future. And we will hope that your people are wise enough to recognize the choice we're offering them." She stood up from the table. "Take this message to your admiral, Captain. Tell him that humanity requests a meeting with the Empire's leadership. Tell him that we have something to offer that could save his people from the fate they're racing toward. And if he refuses, then he will learn the hard way what humanity has become during your absence." As the tea room began to fade around them, realized that everything was about to change. The question was whether that change would come through wisdom or through consequences that no one could escape. Admiral listened to Captain's report with growing rage. His 4 hands clenched and unclenched as he paced the bridge of his flagship. Around him, his officers watched nervously as their commander's anger filled the room like a storm. 800 years old, the admiral snarled. "Telepathy, consciousness projection, this is madness." "Sir, I saw it with my own eyes," insisted. "The humans have abilities that go beyond anything we understand. They know about our empire, our struggles, our plans. They've been watching us for centuries." "Impossible," snapped. "No species develops that quickly. These are tricks, illusions meant to frighten us into surrender." He turned to address the bridge crew. "Prepare all ships for full planetary bombardment. We will turn this world to ash and glass. Whatever these creatures have become, they will burn like everything else." "Admiral," said desperately, "the human woman warned that force won't work on them anymore," she said. "Enough," roared. "I have conquered 1,000 worlds with these same weapons. No primitive species can stand against the might of the Empire." The Admiral activated the fleet-wide communication system. His voice echoed through every ship in the massive force. "All vessels, assume attack formation. Charge planet-killer weapons to maximum power. We will show these humans what happens to those who dare to threaten the Empire." Throughout the fleet, 2,000 ships moved into precise formation. Their massive weapons began to glow with deadly energy. Each ship carried enough firepower to crack a planet's surface. Together, they could reduce Earth to space dust. "Watch the weapon readings climb toward full charge. Fire on my command," he announced. 3, 2, 1. But instead of his own voice saying the final word, it was a different voice entirely. A gentle, familiar voice that spoke perfect. Doctor stood in the center of the bridge. She hadn't walked through the doors or transported in through any visible means. She was simply there, as if she had always been there. Her elderly human form looked small and fragile among the towering warriors, but her presence filled the room with a strange, peaceful energy. Every officer on the bridge froze in shock. The Admiral's mouth hung open as he stared at the impossible sight. "Hello, Admiral," said calmly. "I thought it might be time for us to meet in person." "How did you get aboard my ship?" demanded. "Our shields, our security systems, are designed to stop physical objects and known forms of energy," interrupted. "Consciousness travels by different rules." She looked around the bridge with sadness in her eyes. "You were about to make a terrible mistake, Admiral, one that would have consequences far beyond what you can imagine." "Security," shouted into his communicator. "Intruder on the bridge." Shook her head. "They can't hear you right now. In fact, they can't do anything right now." The Admiral looked around in confusion. Every member of his crew stood motionless, like statues. Their eyes were open and aware, but their bodies wouldn't move. Even their breathing had stopped, though they showed no signs of distress. "What have you done to them?" "Given them a moment to think," replied. "Time is about to slow down for everyone in your fleet. Your consciousness will remain active, but everything else will pause. This will give you all a chance to truly understand what you've been doing." "Understand what?" His expression grew infinitely sad. "The cost of your choices, Admiral. The price others have paid for your empire's expansion." Suddenly, His mind exploded with visions that weren't his own. He was a child running through burning streets as giant ships filled the sky above his. He was a mother watching her children taken away to work in alien mines. He was an old man dying alone on a planet stripped of all life and beauty. He was a scientist watching his life's work destroyed by invaders who cared nothing for knowledge or art. The visions came faster and faster, experienced the conquest of the empire from the perspective of every victim. He felt their terror, their grief, their hopeless desperation. He lived through the final moments of entire civilizations as they were wiped away for the sake of resources and territory. But worse than the individual deaths was the greater loss. He saw what those civilizations might have become if they'd been allowed to survive. He witnessed the art they would have created, the discoveries they would have made, the wisdom they would have shared with the galaxy. The Empire hadn't just destroyed lives. They had destroyed infinite potential. They had stolen futures that could never be reclaimed. Throughout the fleet, every was experiencing the same visions. Admirals and soldiers, engineers and pilots, all of them lived through the consequences of their actions. They felt the weight of every world they had conquered, every species they had enslaved, every life they had ended. Some cried out in anguish, others wept silently. Many simply stared in horror at the true scope of what they had done. When the visions finally ended, found himself on his knees. His 4 arms shook as he tried to process what he had experienced. Around him, his crew was slowly coming back to awareness, their faces pale with shock. "Why?" he whispered to, "why show us this?" "Because," she said gently, "you needed to understand what you've become. Your empire began with noble goals, to explore the galaxy, to spread culture, to ensure your people's survival. But somewhere along the way, you forgot that other species have the same right to exist that you do." The Admiral looked up at her with haunted eyes. "What do you want from us?" "The same thing we wanted 800 years ago," replied. "A chance to live in peace. But now we're strong enough to ensure that peace, not just for ourselves but for every species in the galaxy." She gestured toward the weapon displays, watched in amazement as the readings began to change. The planet-killing weapons were transforming into something else entirely. "Your weapons now serve a different purpose," explained. "They can terraform dead worlds, restore poisoned atmospheres, and heal the damage that's been done. They will work perfectly for construction and creation. They simply won't function for destruction anymore. You're taking away our ability to defend ourselves." Smiled, "No, Admiral. We're giving you the ability to defend yourselves in a way that actually works. Violence creates more violence. Fear breeds more fear. But creation builds trust, and trust builds lasting security." Throughout the fleet, crews were discovering that their ships had been fundamentally altered. Weapons that had once fired death now projected healing energy. Engines that had powered conquest now carried the tools of restoration. Even their communication systems had been modified to promote cooperation instead of domination. "This is impossible," the science officer whispered. "Our technology is advanced beyond anything these humans should understand." "Your technology is based on forcing the universe to obey your will," said. "Ours is based on working with the natural forces that already exist. When you understand the deeper patterns that connect all things, changing matter and energy becomes as simple as asking instead of demanding." Struggled to his feet. "And if we refuse, if we find ways to build new weapons?" His expression grew stern. "Then you'll discover that the universe itself has become your teacher. Every time you choose cruelty, you'll experience the full weight of that cruelty yourselves. Every time you cause suffering, you'll understand exactly what that suffering feels like. Your own conscience will become your greatest enemy." She began to fade, her form becoming translucent. "The choice is yours, Admiral. You can fight against this change and experience pain every time you try to hurt others. Or you can accept it and discover what your people are truly capable of when they use their gifts to heal instead of harm. As disappeared completely, a new voice spoke over the fleet communication system. It was Captain, broadcasting from his scout ship. Admiral, we're receiving incoming transmissions from several nearby star systems. Their requests for help. Refugee ships, damaged planets, species facing extinction from natural disasters. They're asking if the Empire would be willing to assist with rescue and restoration efforts. Stared at the communications display. For 800 years, those transmissions would have been requests for mercy that the Empire would have ignored. Now they represented something different, an opportunity to become something better than conquerors. "What are your orders, Admiral?" his second officer asked quietly. Closed his eyes and saw again all the faces of the beings his empire had destroyed. He thought about the visions of what they might have become, the futures that had been lost forever. When he opened his eyes, his voice was steady and clear. "Signal the fleet. We're going to answer those calls for help." It was time for the Empire to learn what it meant to be gardeners instead of predators. The conference room aboard the flagship had been transformed. Where once there had been charts of conquered worlds and displays of military might, now there were holographic images of damaged planets waiting for help. The cold metal walls had somehow become warm wood, and soft light filled the space like sunshine through leaves. Admiral sat at the head of a table that had grown from the floor like a living tree. Around him, his senior officers looked uncomfortable in the peaceful surroundings. They were warriors who had spent their lives planning battles, not beings who knew how to discuss healing and restoration. Doctor sat across from them, no longer the fragile-looking elderly human they had first seen. Her form seemed to shift and change, sometimes appearing as the young woman she had been when the Empire first invaded Earth, sometimes as an ageless being made of starlight and wisdom. "You have questions," she said simply. "Ask them." Admiral leaned forward, his forearms resting on the table. "Why didn't you destroy us when we returned? You clearly have the power to do so." His expression was thoughtful. "Because destruction is the old way, Admiral. It's the way your empire has operated for thousands of years, and look where it has led. Your people are dying on overcrowded worlds. Your resources are running out. Your subject species are rebelling. Violence has brought you to the edge of collapse. So what alternative are you offering?" Partnership said, "Your species has incredible natural abilities. Your biotechnology is among the most advanced in the galaxy. Your people can communicate through shared consciousness across vast distances. You live for centuries, giving you time to develop deep wisdom. These are gifts that could heal the galaxy instead of conquering it." She gestured, and images appeared above the table. The officers watched as scenes of restoration played out before them. Ships worked alongside other species to rebuild destroyed worlds. Their biotechnology was used to create new life instead of weapons. Their long allowed them to guide younger species through centuries of growth and development. "But this would mean abandoning everything we've built," said General X, the Empire's military commander. "Our entire civilization is based on expansion and conquest." "Your civilization is based on survival," corrected. "You conquered because you believed it was the only way to ensure your people's future. But that was fear talking, not wisdom. True security comes from creating abundance for everyone, not from taking resources from others." Admiral studied the images of cooperation and healing. "And if some of our people refuse this path, the Empire is vast, with many factions who profit from the current system. Form becoming fully human again. Then they will discover that the universe itself has become their teacher. The changes we've made aren't limited to your weapons or your ships, Admiral. The laws of cause and effect have been strengthened in this region of space." "What does that mean?" "It means that actions now have immediate and personal consequences. If someone chooses cruelty, they will experience that cruelty themselves. If they cause suffering, they will feel that suffering as their own. If they try to take life, they will face the possibility of losing their own. The science officer, Doctor Is, leaned forward with interest. Are you saying you've altered the fundamental forces of reality? We've made visible what was always true, replied. Every action creates ripples that eventually return to their source. In the past, those consequences might take lifetimes to manifest. Now they happen quickly enough for beings to learn from them. And the positive actions, asked Captain, who had been quiet until now. What happens to those? Smiled, and for a moment her entire form glowed with warm light. Creation brings joy, healing brings peace, protection brings strength, love brings love. The universe rewards those who work with its natural patterns instead of fighting against them. Admiral stood and walked to the large viewing port that showed Earth below. The planet looked like a jewel in space, blue and green and alive with potential. How do we know this isn't just another form of conquest? He asked. You're forcing us to change our ways, whether we want to or not. Are we? Asked gently. Your weapons still function perfectly for construction and healing. Your ships can still travel anywhere you choose. Your people are free to live however they decide. The only thing that's changed is that harmful actions now carry immediate consequences. She joined him at the viewing port. Tell me, Admiral, in all your centuries of conquest, how many species chose to be enslaved? How many worlds volunteered to be stripped of their resources? How many beings asked to watch their children die in your mines? Was quiet for a long moment. None, he admitted finally. Yet your empire forced those choices on them anyway. We're simply ensuring that forcing harmful choices on others is no longer possible. Free will still exist, but it must be truly free for everyone, not just the strongest. The Admiral turned to face his officers. What are the reports from the fleet? General X consulted his display. 60% of our ships have responded positively to the first rescue mission requests. They're excited about the new technology and the possibilities it offers. 20% are confused but willing to try. The remaining 20% are resistant. Resistant how? Some captains are trying to modify their ships to restore weapon functions. Others are attempting to contact the outer colonies to organize opposition to these changes. A few have simply refused orders and are trying to leave this star system. Nodded as if this was expected. And what have they discovered? The modifications don't work, Doctor Is reported with fascination. Every attempt to create destructive weapons fails. The technology simply won't function for harmful purposes. As for the ships trying to leave, they find themselves experiencing vivid memories of their victims every time they try to engage their engines. No one is trapped, explained. But those who choose to continue causing harm will find that choice increasingly difficult to live with. Eventually, they'll either change their ways or find somewhere isolated where they can't hurt anyone else. Admiral returned to his seat. You spoke of partnership. What exactly are you proposing? His expression became serious. The galaxy is full of species facing crises similar to your own. Climate disasters, resource depletion, technological disasters, social collapse. Most could be helped with the right knowledge and tools. Humanity has learned to work with natural forces to create abundance. Your people have the longevity and biological skills to implement that knowledge on a massive scale. Images filled the air again, showing worlds in need, planets choking on pollution, species facing extinction, civilizations torn apart by war and scarcity. We're offering to teach you what we've learned about sustainable abundance, continued. In return, your people would help us share that knowledge throughout the galaxy, not through conquest but through invitation, not by force but by example. And humanity would lead this effort, General X asked suspiciously. No, said firmly. Humanity would participate as equals. Leadership would be shared among all species based on wisdom and ability, not on military strength. The goal isn't to create a new empire with Earth at its center. It's to create a community where every species contributes their unique gifts. Doctor is raised a tentacle. What about species that refuse to cooperate, that prefer conquest to collaboration? They'll discover the same thing your empire has discovered, replied. The universe no longer supports that way of being. They can change their methods or find themselves increasingly isolated from the galactic community. Admiral studied the faces of his officers. He saw confusion, fear, and uncertainty, but also something he hadn't expected: hope. For the first time in centuries, his people had been offered an alternative to endless war. The outer colonies won't accept this easily, he said. There are billions of who have never known anything but conquest. Changing our entire civilization will take time. We have time, said gently. Humanity waited 800 years for you to return. We can be patient while your people learn new ways of being. But the process must begin now, before the damage to the galaxy becomes irreversible. The Admiral stood once more, this time with decision in his posture. I'll need to contact the Colonial Council. There will be debates, arguments, possibly even civil war among our people. Then we'll help you through it, promised. No species has to face these changes alone. That's the point of partnership. Activated his communication system. Attention all ships of the fleet. We are beginning a new chapter in our people's history. Tomorrow, we start our first joint mission with humanity to restore a world that was damaged by war. Volunteers will be given priority assignments. He paused, looking out at Earth one more time. To those who find these changes difficult to accept, remember this: our old ways were leading us to extinction. These humans have offered us a path to a future where our children can thrive instead of merely survive. That's worth any sacrifice. As the transmission ended, began to fade again. Thank you, Admiral. You've made a wise choice. Will we see you again? Whenever you need guidance, someone will be there, promised. Humanity has learned that the greatest strength comes from lifting others up, not standing above them. Months later, Admiral stood on the bridge of his flagship as it approached the war-torn planet of 5. Behind him, bioengineers worked alongside human ecologists and farmers to plan the world's restoration. It would take years to fully heal the damage, decades to restore the ecosystem, perhaps centuries for the traumatized population to fully trust again. But for the first time in his long life, was working to create something instead of destroying it. And despite all the challenges ahead, despite the resistance from the outer colonies and the difficulties of changing an entire civilization, he felt something he had never experienced before. Hope for a future where the strong protected the weak, where different species shared their gifts instead of fighting over resources, and where the galaxy could heal from the wounds of countless wars. The age of conquest was ending. The age of cooperation had begun.